Good morning. And we continue with another beautiful frosty morning. I think it's 15 degrees. Let me check. Or was it 14? 14 degrees. All right. This next part is called Damned If You Do. Oh, the birds are coming in. Oh, that's my stomach growling. One of those days. Okay. Chapter 8, Damned If You Do. Morton, a psychologist on the staff of a private clinic, has a problem with the clinic director, Roberta. At staff meetings, Roberta generally opens discussion of issues by asking all staff members for their opinions. She invites debate about the pros and cons of proposals, but somehow, when the meeting ends, they always end up deciding by consensus to do what Roberta thinks best. The women on the staff are happy with Roberta as a director. They feel she listens to their point of view, and they like the rule by consensus rather than fiat. But Morton feels Roberta is manipulative. If they are going to do what she wants anyway, why does she make them waste their breath expressing opinions? He would prefer she just lay down the law, since she is the boss. Morton's impression that Roberta does not act like a boss is the result of style difference. She is acting like a boss, a woman boss. She prefers to rule by consensus, and the women on her staff also like it that way. But he is frustrated by her indirectness. He thinks she should rule by fiat. I'm not really sure that that's right anymore. It's F-I-A-T. I was sure. And then I got cold. And I was less sure. Oh, that window's still. Okay, there we go. All right. Style differences may also be partly responsible for the observation that some women who have achieved high status or positions of authority do not behave in ways appropriate to their positions. But there may be another factor at work, too. Since Bettina Horner's pioneering research, many psychologists have observed that women seem to fear success. Again, the research on children's play sheds light. Take Marjorie Harness Goodwin's research on verbal routines by which the preteen and teenage girls in her study criticized each other behind their backs. Significantly and sadly, the examples Goodwin mentions are based on success. Girls are criticized for appearing better than the others in the group. Of two disputes that Goodwin describes, one girl's offense was to skip a grade in school and get straight A's on her report card. The other girl incurred the wrath of her peers by wearing newer and more expensive clothes than they had. In my own study of videotaped conversations among friends, a similar complaint is lodged by the 6th grade girls against another girl. All right, looks like we've got Shannon and Julia here. Shannon, she's gotta wear a polo every day. Julia, I know. Well, I like polo, but God. Shannon, every day? Julia, really? Shannon, just think how much, and she's putting herself up. Okay, appearing better than others is a violation of the girl's egalitarian ethic. People are supposed to stress their connections and similarity. In light of these and many other studies of girls' real conversations, it is no wonder that girls fear rejection by their peers. If they appear too successful and boys don't, boys from the earliest age learn that they can get what they want, higher status, by displaying superiority. Girls learn that displaying superiority will not get them what they want, affiliation with their peers. For this, they have to appear the same as, not better than, their friends. The appearance of similarity does not mean actual sameness. Penelope Eckert, who spent several years with high school students in a Midwestern city, explains how complex the girls' system of masked status can be. For example, the popular girls are the ones who must determine when to switch from the clothes of one season to the clothes of the next. For example, from winter to spring clothing. If less popular girls show up wearing cotton clothes while the popular girls are still wearing wool, they have committed a gaffe, shown themselves to be outsiders. If they switch after the popular girls have appeared in cotton, they mark themselves as followers, limited to public information. The goal is the goal is to dress in unison. If they make the switch on the same day as the popular girls, they are gloriously the same and have subtly proven that they are in the know. The next little section, never boast or brag. Another aspect of the pressure on girls not to appear better than their peers is the injunction not to boast. Gender differences in attitudes toward boasting are the cause of much mutual judgment and misjudgment between women and men, and some odd verbal behavior on the part of women. For example, it's too cold not to have my car running. How about that? Whew. I'll make some noise. Unfreeze. Okay. Takes 8 minutes to freeze one crystal. Woo! Cold to the bone, darn it. All right. For example, a college student named Connie was telling her friends that a high school advisor had tried to talk her out of applying to the college they were all now attending. Okay. The advisor had felt that Connie's applying would hurt the chances of another girl from the same high school, Sylvia. In explaining the advisor's thinking, Connie said, Sylvia's grades weren't, it sounds so pompous of me, but Sylvia's grades weren't as good as mine. Connie could barely bring herself to make a simple factual statement about her grades because it smacked of boasting. Margaret and Charles are both successful lawyers. Though they get along perfectly well when alone, They occasionally find themselves arguing after dinner engagements with new acquaintances, especially people who have status and connections to tax law. Charles' specialty. Margaret feels that Charles boasts. He lets it be known how important he is by mentioning recognition he has received, cases he has won, and important people he knows. In Margaret's view, name dropping. In his eagerness to impress, he sometimes embellishes what he has done and implies that he knows people he has actually met only once or twice. For her part, Margaret tries to hide her success. She deliberately avoids letting on if she knows important people whose names arise in the conversation. She never alludes to her many accomplishments. Oh, wow, that's beautiful. Okay. Charles is frustrated by Margaret's behavior, as she is by his. Charles is as frustrated by Margaret's behavior as she is by his. If she will not let on how important she is, he does it for her. This upsets her even more. She feels his boasting for her is as impolite as her doing it herself, and all the alternatives she can imagine are unappealing. She can't ignore or disrupt Charles' attempts to speak for her, which seems rude to him and violates what she feels is an obligation to support him. She can let him talk for her, which frames her as a child who cannot speak for herself, or she can participate and speak in a way she does not want to speak. Boasting. Margaret feels people will not like her if she boasts. She would rather they learn from others how successful she is, and she feels they will approve of her modesty when they do. She also fears people will not like Charles if he boasts. And this is upsetting to her because she is affiliated with Charles. So what people think of him is a reflection on her. Charles, on the other hand, feels that people will not respect him unless he lets them know that he merits respect. He also feels they will respect Margaret more if they know that she is an accomplished attorney and not just his wife. Both Margaret and Charles judge each other's way of talking in terms of personality characteristics, and each also places moral value on style. Margaret assumes that a good person is modest and self-effacing. Charles considers displaying accomplishments to be a requirement, not a liability, and he regards Margaret's to him false modesty as foolishly self-denigrating evidence of insecurity. Each one thinks he or she is simply expecting the other to be a good person, but their definitions of a good person vary because of the differing expectations for a good girl and a good boy. The reluctance of girls and women to boast in certain situations shows up in two strikingly similar examples that I encountered in vastly different contexts. Ingmar Bergman's Scenes from a Marriage opens with a couple being interviewed for a magazine by a woman named Mrs. Palm. Marianne and Johann respond very differently to Mrs. Palm's questions. How would you describe yourselves in a few words? And here's Johan's answer. It might sound conceited if I described myself as extremely intelligent, successful, youthful, well balanced, and sexy. A man with a world conscience, cultivated, well read, popular, and a good mixer. Let me see, what else can I think of? Friendly. Friendly is a nice way even to people. Friendly in a nice way even to people who are worse off. I like sports. I am a good family man. A good son. I have no debts, and I pay my taxes. I respect our government, whatever it does, and I love our royal family. I've left the state church. Is this enough, or do you want more details? I'm a splendid lover. Aren't I, Marianne? Sorry. All right. This is Marianne's answer. What can I say? I'm married to Johan and have 2 daughters. Even with prodding, Marianne doesn't add much information. Marianne says, that's all I can think of for the moment. Mrs. Palm says, there must be something. Marianne says, I think Johan is rather nice. Johan says, kind of you, I'm sure. Marianne, we've been married for 10 years. Johan, I've just renewed the contract. Marianne, I doubt if I have the same natural appreciation of my own excellence as Johan. But to tell the truth, I'm glad I can live the life I do. It's a good life, if you know what I mean. Well, what else can I say? Oh dear, this is difficult. Johan, she has a nice figure. Marianne, you're joking. I'm trying to take this thing seriously. I have 2 daughters, Karen and Eva. Johan, you've already said that. I was reminded of this fictional conversation when I read the following real-life dialogue in Carol Gilligan's In a Different Voice as part of her research exploring children's moral development. Did I say Gilligan? No, Gilligan's. It's Gilligan's, yeah. Gilligan interviewed 2 11-year-old children named Amy and Jake. Among the questions she asked them was, how would you describe yourself? Oh, crap. How would you describe yourself to yourself? Ew, there's another big cloud. There's up. There's a ton of birds. Oh, goodness. There's a whole bunch of birds. Feel like I'm probably out of the road. The chances are likely. Ah, it's just so lovely. What a lovely day. That one cloud's just picking up all the colors. Yeah, there we go. Forgetting where I was. Where was I? How would you describe yourself to yourself? I think I'm going to write that one out because I had never thought of that. Because it's me in relation to other things. Like, well, I'm not as tall as, and then, but I'm not as short as, and then, I usually wear a coat, like a whole bunch of descriptions. So actually writing out, how would I describe myself to myself? Okay. And I continue, because here's their answers. First, here is how Jake answered. Perfect. That's my conceited side. What do you want? Any way that I choose to describe myself? Interviewer. If you had to describe the person you are in a way that you yourself wouldn't know it was you, what would you say? I'd start off with 11 years old. Jake. You can fill in the last name, it says. I'd have to add that I live in blank town, because that is a big part of me. And also that my father is a doctor, because I think that does change me a little bit. And that I don't believe in crime, except for when your name is Hines, a reference to a previous question Jake was asked. That I think school is boring, because I think that kind of changes your character a little bit. I don't sort of know how to describe myself, because I don't know how to read my personality. If you had to describe the way you actually would describe yourself, what would you say? I like corny jokes. I don't really like to get down to work, but I can do all the stuff in school. Every single problem that I have seen in school, I have been able to do, except for ones that take knowledge, and after I do the reading, I have been able to do them. But sometimes I don't want to waste my time on easy homework. And also, I'm crazy about sports. I think, unlike a lot of people, that the world still has hope. Most people that I know, I like. And I have the good life, pretty much as good as any I have seen. And I am tall for my age. All right, and here's how the girl Amy answered the questions. Do you mean my character? Well, what do you think? Well, I don't know. I describe myself as, well, what do you mean? If you had to describe the person you are in a way that you yourself would know it was you, what would you say? Well, I'd say that I was someone who likes school and studying, and that's what I want to do with my life. I want to be some kind of scientist or something, and I want to do things, and I want to help people. And I think that's what kind of person I am, or what kind of person I try to be. And that's probably how I describe myself. And I want to do something to help other people. Why is that? Well, because I think that this world has a lot of problems, and I think that everybody should try to help somebody else in some way, and the way I'm choosing is through science. Okay, that rattle. I don't know if you can hear it, but I can't not hear it. Okay. Stay with me. The sun isn't here yet. We're still out here freezing. Woo. Woo. What struck me about these two children's answers to the same question was, first, how much longer Jake's was, and I assume the ellipsis for after hope indicates even more words were omitted, and how boastful it was, in contrast to Amy's statement, which was not boastful at all. Jake says he is perfect. His father is a doctor. He can solve every single problem. At school, even though he finds school boring, he has the best life he has seen, and he's tall. It is possible that his comment, "Sometimes I don't want to waste my time on easy homework," might be a defense of less than superior achievement at school. In contrast, Amy says she likes school and studying, but doesn't say if she does well at it, and that she wants to help people through science. Both Johan in Bergman's screenplay and Jake in Gilligan's interview are aware that they sound conceited and make a joke of it. Indeed, Johan's entire answer seems tongue-in-cheek, like his comments interspersed in Marianne's answer. But Johan and Jake say what they do nonetheless. Though Amy has a bit more to say than Marianne, it isn't that much more. Both Amy and Marianne repeat themselves rather than fulfill the requests in a way that might sound like bragging. Marianne does not mention that she is a lawyer. Amy says she plans to be a scientist, but she emphasizes that her purpose will be to help others rather than to achieve money, fame, or status. Oh, that's pretty. Women's feelings that they should not boast come from explicit training, as well as peer pressure in childhood. Such training is described in the Alumni newsletter of one of the most academically challenging high schools in the country. In this newsletter, a woman wrote an epitaph to her sister, who had been the very top student in her graduating class and who had recently died. A brilliant woman, her sister had had a moderately successful career that did not reflect her spectacular ability. The writer comments that her sister took too much to heart her mother's admonitions. Stay in the background, never brag, always do your best. These examples demonstrate that women are expected not to boast in relatively public situations, but it would be misleading to imply that women never boast at all. I returned to the couple I dubbed Margaret and Charles for an example of a context in which she boasted, but he felt he would not have. In the situation described earlier, Margaret felt Charles should not show off to new acquaintances. On another occasion, Charles felt that Margaret was inappropriately boasting in complaining to close friends that she had not been promoted to partner as quickly as men in her firm, who had brought in much less business and had far fewer billable hours. Margaret enumerated her early successes. Charles told her later that he thought this had been insensitive, since one of their listening friends was a young lawyer who was not advancing quickly at all. To Charles, self-aggrandizing information is to be used in public to achieve status, appropriately displayed when first meeting people or with people who have or seem to be claiming superior status. But to Margaret, self-aggrandizing information is to be used only in private, appropriately revealed in rapport talk, conversations with people she knows and trusts, who will not judge her for her pride. When dealing with close friends, she forgets about their relative status, an aspect of relationships that Charles never forgets. The different lenses of status and connection may once more work against women. Women are reluctant to display their achievements in public in order to be likable, but regarded through the lens of status, they are symmetrically underestimated and thought self-depreciating and insecure. It is tempting to recommend that women learn to display their accomplishments in public to ensure that they receive the respect they have earned. Unfortunately, however, women are judged by the standards of women's behavior. This was evident, for example, at a faculty meeting devoted to promotions, in which a woman's professor's success was described. She was extremely well published and well known in the field. A man commented with approval, "She wears it well." In other words, she was praised for not acting as successful as she was. By implication, if she had acted in a way consonant with her achievement, she would not have been praised, and perhaps would not even have been liked. Alright, and the next one. Hang on, let me get a drink. I think my eyes are fluttering. It's just cold enough in places and then warm enough in other places. Excuse me. Sorry if I makes anybody yawn. Okay. His politeness is her powerlessness. There are many kinds of evidence. There are many kinds of evidence that women and men are judged differently, even if they talk the same way. This tendency makes mischief in discussions of women, men, and power. If a linguistic strategy is used by a woman, it is seen as powerless. If it is done by a man, it is seen as powerful. Often the labeling of women's language as powerless language reflects the view of women's behavior through the lens of men's. Because they are not struggling to be one up, women often find themselves framed as one down. Any situation is ripe for misinterpretation because status and connections are displayed by the same moves. This ambiguity accounts for much misinterpretation by experts as well as non-experts, by which women's ways of talking, uttered in a spirit of rapport, are branded powerless. Nowhere is this inherent ambiguity clearer than in a brief comment in a newspaper article in which a couple, both psychologists, were jointly interviewed. The journalist asked them the meaning of being very polite. The two experts responded simultaneously, giving different answers. The man said subservience, and the woman said sensitivity. Both experts were right, but each was describing the view of a different gender. Experts and non-experts alike tend to see anything women do as evidence of powerlessness. The same newspaper article quotes another psychologist as saying, a man might ask a woman, will you please go to the store? Where a woman might say, gee, I really need a few things from the store, but I'm so tired. The woman's style is called covert, a term suggesting negative qualities like being sneaky or underhanded. The reason offered for this is power. The woman doesn't feel she has a right to ask directly. Here comes the sun. Granted, women have lower status than men in our society, but this is not necessarily why they prefer not to make outright demands. The explanation for a woman's indirectness could just as well be her seeking connection. If you get your way as a result of having demanded it, the payoff is satisfying in terms of status. You're one up because others are doing as you told them. But if you get your way because others happen to want the same thing, or because they offered freely, the payoff is in rapport. You're neither one up nor one down, but happily connected to others whose wants are the same as yours. Furthermore, if indirectness is understood by both parties, then there is nothing covert about it. That a request is being made is clear. Calling an indirect communication covert reflects the view of someone for whom the direct style seems natural and logical, a view more common among men. Indirectness itself does not reflect powerlessness. It is easy to think of situations where indirectness is the prerogative of those in power. For example, a wealthy couple who knew that their servants will do their bidding need not give direct orders, but can simply state wishes. The woman of the house says, "Oh, it's chilly in here," and the servants set about raising the temperature. The man of the house says, "It's dinner time," and the servant sees about having dinner served. Perhaps the ultimate indirectness is getting someone to do something without saying anything at all. The hostess rings a bell and the maid brings the next course. Or a parent enters the room where children are misbehaving and stands with hands on hips, and the children immediately stop what they are doing. Entire cultures operate on elaborate systems of indirectness. For example, I discovered in a small research project that most Greeks assumed that a wife who asked, "Would you like to go to the party?" was hinting that she wanted to go. They felt that she wouldn't bring it up if she didn't want to go. Furthermore, they felt she would not state her preference outright, because that would sound like a demand. Indirectness was the appropriate means for communicating her preference. Japanese culture has developed indirectness to a fine art. For example, the Japanese anthropologist Harumi Befu explains the delicate exchange of indirectness required by a simple invitation to lunch. When his friend extended the invitation, Befu first had to determine whether it was meant literally or just pro forma, much as an American might say, "We'll have to have you come over for dinner sometime, but would not expect you to turn up at the door." Having decided the invitation was meant literally, and having accepted, Befu was then asked what he would like to eat. Following custom, he said anything will do. But his friend, also following custom, pressed him to specify. Host and guest repeated this exchange an appropriate number of times until Befu deemed it polite to answer the question politely by saying that tea over rice would be fine. When he arrived for lunch, he was indeed served tea over rice as the last course of a sumptuous meal. Befu was not surprised by the feast because he knew that protocol required it. Had he been given what he had asked for, he would have been insulted. But protocol also requires that he make a great show of being surprised. This account of mutual indirectness in a lunch invitation may strike Americans as excessive, but far more cultures in the world use elaborate systems of indirectness than value directness. Only modern Western societies place a priority on direct communication, and even for us it is more a value than a practice. Evidence from other cultures also makes it clear that indirectness does not in itself reflect low status. Anthropologist Eleanor Keenan, for example, found that in a Malagasy-speaking village on the island of Madagascar, it is women who are direct and men who are indirect. And the villagers see the men's indirect way of speaking, using metaphors and proverbs as the better way. For them, indirectness, like the men who use it, has high status. They regard women's direct style as clumsy and crude, debasing the beautiful subtlety of men's language. Whether women or men are direct or indirect differs. What remains constant is that the women's style is negatively evaluated, seen as lower in status than the men's. And the next one here. It's different coming from a man. Research from our own culture provides many examples of the same behavior being interpreted differently, depending on whether it's done by women or men. Take, for example, the case of tag questions, statements with little questions added onto the end, as in, "It's a nice day, isn't it?" Linguist Robin Lakoff first pointed out that many women use more tag questions than men. Those studies seeking to test Lakoff's observation have had somewhat mixed results. Most support it. Jacqueline Sachs, observing the language of children as young as 2 to 5, found that girls used more than twice as many tag questions as boys. And research has shown that people expect women to use tags. Psychologists David and Robert Siegler conducted an experiment asking adults to guess the sex of speakers. Sure enough, the stereotype held. Subjects guessed a woman was speaking when tags were used, a man when they weren't. The stereotype can actually be more compelling than reality. And another experiment, psychologists Nora Newcomb and Diane Arnkoff presented adults with communications in which women and men used equal numbers of tag questions, and found that their subjects thought the women had used more. Most troubling of all, Women and men are judged differently, even if they speak the same way. Communications researcher Patricia Hayes Bradley found that when women use tag questions and disclaimers, subjects judged them as less intelligent and knowledgeable than men who also used them. When women did not give support for their arguments, they were judged less intelligent and knowledgeable. But men who advanced in arguments without support were not. Hang on. In other words, talking in ways that are associated with women causes women to be judged negatively, but talking the same way does not have this effect on men. So it is not the ways of talking that are having the effect so much as people's attitudes toward women and men. Many other studies have similar results. Psychologists John and Sandra Condry asked subjects to interpret why an infant was crying. If they had been told the baby was a boy, subjects thought he was angry. But if they had been told the child was a girl, they thought she was afraid. Ann Mackey and Laurel Richardson with Judith Cook discovered that when students judged professors, generating more class discussion was taken to be a sign of incompetence only if the professor was female. Okay, I gotta get from 29 to 44. And then we'll be done. So let's see. I don't want to read all this. But if I do another one, I'll just be reading it then. Alright, let's try, because it's still beautiful. Okay, the next category. Silence is golden or leaden. Research itself has fallen prey to this double standard. In studies claiming that men exert power by talking more than women, women's silence is cited as evidence that they have no power. At the same time, other studies claim that men's use of silence and refusing to speak is a show of their power. A theme running through Mira Komarovsky's classic study, Blue Collar Marriage, is that many of the wives interviewed said they talked more than their husbands. "He's tongue-tied," one woman said of her husband. "My husband has a great habit of not talking," said another. More of the wives want to talk and have their husbands talk about problems. In contrast, more husbands withdrew in the face of troubles. "When I don't feel good, I light out and don't dump my load on them." Emotional stress or a wife's demands. Yet there is no question but that these husbands are dominant in their marriages. Oh, Lord. Okay, I know this word, but I'm going to go ahead and say it wrong. Taciturnity itself can be an instrument of power. Komarovsky quotes a mother who says of her husband, "He doesn't say much, but he means what he says, and the children mind him." Jack Sattel believes men use silence to exercise power over women, and he illustrates with the following scene from Erica Jong's novel, Fear of Flying. The first line of dialogue is spoken by Isadora, the second line by her husband, Bennett. All right. Why do you always have to do this to me? You make me feel so lonely. That comes from you. What do you mean it comes from me? Tonight, I wanted to be happy. It's Christmas Eve. Why do you turn on me? What did I do? Silence. As in, there's only silence. What did I do? He looks at her as if her not knowing were another injury. Look, let's just go to sleep now. Let's just forget it. Forget what? He says nothing. Forget the fact that you turned on me? Forget the fact that you're punishing me for nothing? Forget the fact that I'm lonely and cold and it's Christmas Eve? And again, you've ruined it for me. Is that what you want me to forget? I won't discuss it. Discuss what? What won't you discuss? Shut up. I won't have you screaming in the hotel. I don't give a fuck what you won't have me do. I'd like to be treated civilly. I'd like you to at least do me the courtesy of telling me why you are in such a funk, and don't look at me that way. What way? As if my not being able to read your mind were my greatest sin. I can't read your mind. I don't know why you're so mad. I can't intuit your every wish. If that's what you want in a wife, you don't have it in me. I certainly don't. Then what is it? Please tell me. I shouldn't have to, he says. Good God, do you mean to tell me I'm expected to be a mind reader? Is that the kind of mothering you want? If you had any empathy for me, but I do. My God, you don't give me a chance. You tune out. You don't listen. It was something in the movie, wasn't it? What? In the movie? The quiz again. Do you have to quiz me like some kind of criminal? Do you have to cross-examine me? It was the funeral scene. The little boy looking at his dead mother. Something got you there. That was when you got depressed. And more silence. Well, wasn't it? And more silence. Oh, come on, Bennett. You're making me furious. Please tell me. Please. He gives the words singingly, like little gifts, like hard little turds. What was it about the scene that got me? Don't quiz me. Tell me. She puts her arms around him, and he pulls away. She falls to the floor, holding on to his pajama leg. It looks less like an embrace than like a rescue scene. She sinking, he reluctantly allowing her to cling to his leg for support. Get up! And she's crying. Only if you will tell me. He jerks his leg away. I'm going to bed. This painful scene does seem to support Satel's claim that Bennett uses silence as a weapon against his wife. Each successive refusal to tell her what's bothering him is like a blow laying her lower and lower until she is literally on the floor. But would our interpretation change if we reverse the genders in this scene? With genders reversed, the scene seems impossible. It is hard to imagine a man begging his wife to tell him what he did wrong. What leaped to my mind when I tried to reverse genders was a scene in which the man withdraws, disabling her silence as a weapon. What makes Bennett's silence so punishing is Isadora's insistence on making him talk to her. It is the interaction of the two styles, his withdrawal and her insistence that he tell her what she did wrong. that is devastating to both. If Bennett shared Isadora's belief that problems should be talked out, or she shared his practice of withdrawing when problems arise, they would not have found themselves in this devastating scene. I'm going to stop there because it is both hot and cold in different places at the same time. We've only have 10, 11, 12, 13, approximately 13 pages left of this one, and then we'll be done. Like I said, it's only got 10 chapters, so we're rocking and rolling. Rocking. Okay, here we go. Here's what we're reading. It's the beautiful sun. Dun, 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 dun. Okay. Thank you for being with me today. It has warmed up. It is still 14 degrees. So I'm glad to be here. Glad to be in this warm vehicle. Thanks for being with me and letting me read to you. I appreciate you.